Think about how a toddler picks up their native tongue. They don't study grammar books or memorize vocabulary lists. They just listen and eventually start talking. This is a natural, subconscious process. The brain absorbs patterns from the environment through raw exposure, typically without any formal instruction in grammar rules. The teenager is experiencing language learning. This is a formal, structured process. It relies on conscious effort and external guidance, requiring teachers, textbooks, drills, and examinations to build proficiency. The CTET Pedagogy section focuses heavily on this distinction. Recognizing whether a scenario involves natural exposure or formal rules is a recurring theme in how examiners frame these questions. This timeline illustrates the critical period hypothesis. Notice how the window for language development peaks early in childhood and then drops off after puberty. During these first few years, the human brain is biologically primed to absorb language at its fastest rate. Human learning is categorized into 3 specific pillars. The first is motor learning. This involves the mastery of physical, muscular movements and coordination, activities like walking, cycling, or swimming. The second pillar is verbal learning. This covers the tools we use to communicate, including spoken words, signs, pictures, and symbols. The third pillar is concept learning. This requires higher-order mental processes. To understand complex ideas, the learner must use reasoning, problem-solving, and intelligence to categorize information. In an exam context, whenever a prompt mentions reasoning or intelligence, the question is pointing towards concept learning. A student's progress is shaped by 3 categories. There are learner factors like motivation and health, teacher factors such as communication skills and subject knowledge, and finally, environmental factors ranging from classroom resources to the home atmosphere. These factors are codified in the Right to Education Act of 2009. This legislation mandates free and compulsory education for children between 6 and 14. It also prohibits physical punishment, mental harassment, and the detention of students before they complete elementary school. Under the RTE framework, if a child is not learning, the responsibility is placed on the system and the environment rather than the student. To navigate the pedagogy section, you need to map 4 specific theorists to their core concepts. Because their theories often overlap, the exam tests your ability to associate the right name with the right terminology. First is Jean Piaget. His work is centered on cognitive construction. You will see him linked to the processes of adaptation, assimilation, and accommodation. Next is Noam Chomsky. He proposed the language acquisition device, or LAD. His theory states that every child is born with an inbuilt ability to learn language, requiring only environmental exposure to begin. Lev Vygotsky takes a different approach, focusing on social interaction. According to Vygotsky, language develops primarily through communication with the surrounding community. Finally, Ivan Pavlov is associated with classical conditioning. He argued that learning occurs through stimulus and response, leading to the formation of habits. It is helpful to practice these associations. Pause here and match these 3 theorists to their central concepts before moving on. Recognizing these specific pairings is a frequent requirement in pedagogy questions, as they form the basis for many multiple-choice options. Language development begins well before a child speaks. It starts with nonverbal communication. Crying, cooing, and eye contact are the first steps in building the capacity to interact. As the child grows, their vocabulary expands rapidly. By the time they enter school, most children understand or recognize about 2,000 words, a number that continues to climb into the thousands as they mature. This growth is driven by interaction. When parents and teachers read stories or connect new words to real-life experiences, they provide the patterns the child's brain needs to expand their vocabulary. Let's look at how this appears on the exam. When language is learned naturally, without systematic practice, it is called. Take a moment to choose. The answer is acquisition. This goes back to the distinction between natural exposure and formal instruction we discussed in the first scene. Now, consider which type of learning requires higher-order thinking. Because this involves reasoning and intelligence, it falls under concept learning. Finally, who proposed classical conditioning? That would be Pavlov. In these questions, be careful not to confuse him with Skinner, who is responsible for operant conditioning. This complete summary table serves as a quick reference for these associations. Using these keywords to categorize different theories and learning types can help you navigate the pedagogy section more efficiently.